she explains patiently. Tattoos are distributed according to the woman's destiny. Some are applied to areas that vibrate easily, such as the wrists or the base of the spine. Others on points that are almost never touched, such as the back of the knee or the side of the neck. Quiet places, she says, where secrets hide best. You notice that some tattoo roots follow lines that run across the body like rivers. From a shoulder to a rib, from a heel to the back of the neck, from a chest to the palm of a hand. They are maps, not just of where a woman has been, but of who she wants to become. Historically, it is known that the Mayans had a profound knowledge of the human body not only for medical purposes, but also for spiritual ones. Pressure points, energy flows, and areas linked to fertility or protection were respected in various rituals. Some tattoos were applied in specific places to channel strength, love, intuition, or healing. Historians still debate whether there was a formal atlas of body tattoos, or whether each community created its own systems. There are records that indicate that certain families followed specific maps, passed down from generation to generation, while others created new ones based on dreams, signs, and lunar interpretations. An older woman approaches and holds up a strip of fabric with several tiny knots along its length. "This is my daughter's itinerary," she says. Each knot, a commitment, each space between us, a choice put off until later. Imagine what your own map would look like. What paths would run through your body? Where would be the pause signs, the canyons, the forks? A young woman stretches out her arms, and another begins to draw a line with a very fine brush from the base of her neck to the center of her chest. The line is light, as if it were made of breath. "It is the road of courage," she explains. "The last one to be drawn." You nod silently. Maybe we are all walking without knowing it on maps that are still being drawn. And maybe, just maybe, some lines only appear when we look inside. It is already dawn, and the air in the village seems thicker, not with heat, but with silence. A silence that does not oppress, but rather welcomes. Like an old blanket that holds ancient scents, you follow a dirt path lined with rows of carefully stacked dry leaves. At the end of it, you find a space that few people have access to, the garden of tattoos that no one sees. There is no music, no speech, no sweeping gestures, just presence. You watch a young woman lying on her side on a heated stone, while another, older woman carefully applies a small dot of ink to her lower eyelid. A dot. Nothing more. These tattoos, they explain, are stored under the visible skin, in areas of the body that are rarely seen, body hinges, forgotten intersections, hidden corners, places where love, pain, and secrets meet. You watch a woman partially, undressed to receive a tattoo on the inside of her left ankle. The symbol, a curve that looks like half a comma. "It's the mark of one who returns," the tattoo artist whispers. "Every time you think about leaving, it reminds you that you've done this before." Some tattoos are applied in the gums between the molar teeth, others under the nails, in almost invisible lines that only appear when the nail grows and is polished with tree bark ash. There are also tattoos placed on the inside of the ear, tiny curves that are said to help you hear the whispers of the dead better. Historically, there is archaeological evidence of pigmentation in unconventional areas of the body among Mesoamerican peoples. Bones with pigment preserved in regions such as the palate and nasal cavity have been found, but few written accounts mention the reason for these tattoos. Some theories suggest mystical functions, others believe they were signs of intimate identity, revealed only in special circumstances, such as marriage. Historians still debate whether these hidden tattoos served as symbolic protection or were simply personal rites of passage with no public function. But in the village where you are now, no one seems to need an explanation. What is hidden here is as valuable as what is visible. An older woman approaches and holds up what looks like a mirror, but made of polished shell. She turns it so that the moonlight reveals a small symbol under the chin of a seated young woman, a circle so thin it looks like a crack. "She's had this since before she knew what love was," she says, "and it's never needed to be shown." You touch your own wrist, and for a second you wonder if, even without knowing it, you might be carrying something like that too, a sign, a trace, a secret reminder of something you haven't remembered yet. The tattoo artist lies down next to the young woman who has just received the mark and whispers, "Now you are complete, even if no one sees." And the silence that comes after this sentence is the most beautiful part of the night. You are almost at the end of the journey. The village, now asleep, emanates a thick silence, the kind that only exists when all the stories have been told. Except there is one last house, a small circular house built with smooth stones and covered with leaves tied with red ropes. You approach it without making a sound, not out of respect, but because the ground itself seems to ask you to tread lightly. Wings inside live the woman of invisible lines. No one calls her by any other name. She is ancient, but not old. Her skin seems to bear more symbols than wrinkles, and yet none of them are visible, unless you know exactly where to look. They say she bears all the tattoos that ever existed, not because they drew them on her, but because she remembers them with her whole body. You walk in and see her sitting on a mat, a bowl of water in her hand and a piece of pumice stone in her hand. With each gentle movement of the stone over her skin, a line appears for a few seconds, as if her body is whispering an ancient memory, and then it disappears. She doesn't speak. She just points to a bench in front of her. You sit down. With steady, slow hands, she touches your arm. Her fingers run over your skin, as if reading a text in Braille. And then she says, in a voice that seems to come from far away, "Hear you. Carry longing." Then she presses a spot behind your ear. "Hear doubt." And then with her thumb on your sternum, she says, "Here. Courage is still being born." You don't know what to answer. You don't need to. The woman with the invisible lines explains that among the Mayans, there was a little-known belief that the body tattooed itself, that the strong emotions, the silent vows, the intense losses, all of this left marks on the skin, visible only to those who knew how to see. Some marks appeared after years, as if the body only released its secret when the heart was ready to bear it. Historically, there are no formal records of this practice, only whispers in ceremonial texts, fragments of chants in which it was said that the skin is a sheet that writes itself. Some anthropologists dismiss the idea as superstition, but there are reports of people who, when undergoing certain rituals, noticed subtle changes in the texture of their skin, in the color of certain spots, even in small swellings that followed recognizable patterns. Historians still debate whether this was explained by natural pigments that emerged over time, or by simple autosuggestion. But when faced with the woman with the invisible lines, none of that matters. She stands up, picks up a wet leaf and gently presses it against her wrist. When she pulls it away, there is a circular pattern made of tiny fibers. "You already know the path," she says. "You just have to accept that it starts inside." And then, for the first time in all of history, she smiles. A small, crooked smile, full of lines that only you seem to see. You thank. As you leave the house, the cold breeze of dawn touches your skin gently, and for a moment, you feel something there. It's not heat, nor cold. It's presence, as if a tattoo had just been created, but without the need for a needle or ink, just listening. You walk slowly through the sleeping village, where each house rests under the silent protection of the moon. The wind blows lightly through. The leaves and even the stones on the ground seem to sigh in peace. There are no more questions to be asked. The answers, if they exist, have already been given in the lines, the pauses, the gestures that only attentive eyes perceive. Your body feels more relaxed, as if each muscle had heard a forgotten song, and your mind, well, it no longer runs after meaning. It just calmly follows the rhythm of things that don't need to be explained. Maybe deep down that's what you were looking for. Not the exact meaning of the tattoos, but the lightness of knowing that some marks only appear in the dark, when no one is looking. The breeze cools a little. You cross your arms over your chest and look up at the sky once more. The stars twinkle slowly, as if they have all the time in the world. And now you do too. So, take a deep breath. Allow yourself this rest. Let the images dance behind your closed eyes. Lines, curves, symbols that perhaps only exist within you. And that's okay, the night knows how to keep secrets. Good night. Later, the tattooed woman moves away from the group and stretches in front of the stone mirror. The tattoo glides over your skin like a river following its own course, and in that moment, you understand. Some stories are not written with words, but with muscles, gestures, and scars that breathe. It is now full night. The village has slowly been absorbed by a deep blue dotted with golden dots, stars, lanterns, and eyes that have not yet decided whether to sleep. You walk past silent houses until you reach a small open courtyard surrounded by oval stones and dry leaves. There is a different feeling in the air, as if something is waiting to happen. In the center of the space, 3 women mix pigments in wide clay pots, but this time the ingredients are stored more carefully, the words whispered more ceremoniously. There is something sacred here. One of the women holds up a thin stick carved in the shape of a crescent moon. She points to the sky. It's a full moon night. You then realize these are the paints that only appear under the moonlight. The first young woman dips her fingers into a whitish paste and draws something simple on the palm of her hand, a circle with 3 points. At first glance, the paint appears opaque, almost invisible. But when she holds out her hand under the light of the full moon, the design glows with a silvery blue color that seems to have come from a dream. Another line, this. Time on a shoulder appears golden under the same light. It's not ordinary paint. It is a compound made from purified sap, ground shell powder, and a very rare extract taken from flowers that only bloom on cloudless nights. They say that each color only appears during certain lunar phases. These tattoos are applied at specifics, times in the Mayan calendar, determined by the Tzolk'in and accompanied by silent rituals. The designs are thought to be invisible or colorless in the sun, and to reveal themselves only when illuminated by the right moon. This is why many weddings are scheduled on strategic nights, not only to mark the union, but to allow the tattoos to reveal themselves fully, perhaps for the first and only time. Historically, the use of luminescent compounds in Mesoamerica is documented in ceramics and textiles, but oral accounts of lunar paints, specifically for the skin, are still debated. Some experts believe the glow was the result of minerals crystallizing in contact with skin oils. Others believe that certain pigments responded to specific types of natural light, such as the moon's reflection on water. Historians still debate whether the phenomenon was intentionally created or whether it was born of a happy ritual coincidence. But for those who see their own body glowing in the moonlight, this doubt seems irrelevant. You watch a young bride raise her arms into the light. She slowly turns, and as she does so, the tattoo on her spine flashes in 3 different hues, changing. With the movement, the group around her gasps in unison. "It's the reflection of the promise," says one of the elders. "If she forgets what she said, her body will remember it for her." You sit cross-legged on the floor and look up at the sky. The moon is full, round, almost too close. For a moment it seems as if the moon itself is watching the ceremony, and approving too. And then you think there are tattoos made to be seen, others to be felt. But these were created to shine, only when no one expects. The moon still watches over the sky, but the village's rhythm slows like a breath preparing for sleep. You walk to a more secluded spot, where the sound of the wind in the leaves seems to whisper ancient secrets. There, a small circle of stones surrounds a low fire, the flames barely rising above knee height. Sitting around it are elderly women, the guardians of skin stories. They no longer tattoo, nor do they participate in rituals as before. Now their role is different, to preserve the memory of tattoos that were lost. You approach silently and settle down on a folded blanket. One of them holds a dark wooden box with a simple lock made of rope and bone. Opening it reveals a set of small tablets made of dried clay, each engraved with distinct, complex, almost incomprehensible symbols. These plates are tattoo templates that have already been or no longer used. Some because the clan they belong to disappeared. Others because the meaning has been forgotten or forbidden. And there are still those that, they say, should only be applied to those who really remember them, even if they have never seen them. You examine one of the plaques. The symbol looks like a fish coiled in on itself, surrounded by swirling waves. The old woman smiles at your interest. "This was worn by women who lost their fiancés before the ceremony," she says. "It was placed on the inside of the left thigh. so that if their love returned, it would find its way. Another mold shows a set of circles connected by vertical lines, almost like roots. This was tattooed on the top of the foot. They called it a way marker. According to her, he ensured that the soul would not get lost between the villages of the living and the dead. Historically, certain Mayan tattoos are known to have disappeared over generations. Because the written language of the Mayans was partially lost after European colonization, many of the interpretations of these symbols come from oral traditions, and what we know may be only a shadow of what was understood at the time. Historians still debate whether these ghost tattoos had a ritual, healing, or memorial function. There are those who believe that they were a kind of personal book on the skin, whose chapters could only be read by those who shared the same pain or the same lineage. One of the elders holds a mold close to the fire. The heat causes it to release a faint aroma of clay and resin. Some of these images only reveal themselves when heated, she says. Others need to be washed away with tears. You don't ask if it's metaphor or truth. By now you know they could be the same thing. Before leaving, one of them hands you a small white stone, smooth as polished bone. This one has no symbol, she explains. It's to remind you of what hasn't happened yet. You hold it between your fingers and feel the heat of the fire vibrate through the stone. In the darkness around, the silence is as thick as a promise. You walk back toward the heart of the village, guided by a feeling more than a visible path. The ground is damp in places, as if the earth is absorbing all the stories told so far. And it is in this scenario of near silence that you arrive at a place unlike anything you have seen so far, the Temple of Interrupted Tattoos. The space is circular, open to the sky, with stone columns arranged in a spiral. In the center, a low altar covered with dark cloths and small wax sculptures. All around, markings on the floor indicate where people should sit or kneel. This place, they say, is reserved for those tattoos that were never completed. You notice a young woman sitting with her bare back facing the center. The tattoo on her skin ends abruptly in the middle of a line. It looks incomplete, like a song that has stopped mid-note. She is not sad. Quite the opposite. There is pride in her eyes. My fiancé left before the last line, she says, so I keep his absence visible. The temple, the women present there explain, is where the empty, where interrupted stories are respected and not erased. Some tattoos stop because the ceremony was interrupted, others because the woman changed her mind. And then there are those where the last line belongs to someone who is no longer here to complete it. Each incomplete tattoo is given a space on the inner wall of the temple, where models are drawn with fine charcoal on slabs of unbaked clay. They remain there until the rain washes them away. When the water dissolves, the story will rest, says one of the priestesses. Historically, there are traces of unfinished symbols on pottery and textiles in Mayan communities, often accompanied by phrases indicating waiting, renunciation, or transition. Some archaeologists believe these patterns were intentional, used as a way to mark events that did not come to fruition, or vows that were suspended by outside forces. Historians still debate whether these tattoos were ritualistic in nature or merely a reflection of social events, but it is difficult to look at those bodies, at those deliberately open marks, and not see a choice there. You touch one of the temple walls. It is cold, rigid, but the drawings, though fragile, are still visible. A line that begins as lightning and ends in dust. An incomplete circle like an eclipse about to happen. A spiral that turns only half a turn. A young woman kneels, closes her eyes and kisses her shoulder, where the tattoo looks like a suspended sentence. She doesn't cry. She just breathes. And in that silent gesture, you understand. There are stories that can only be told for what was missing. Night falls and the village seems suspended between worlds, neither awake nor asleep. You walk slowly along a path of flat stones that leads to a small terrace from where you can see the river in the distance, shining like a silver thread. There, among baskets of fibers and low wooden benches, women sew by the light of candles, made with vegetable fat and essence of windflower. But these women do not sew clothes. They are weaving with very fine threads, skin maps. You approach and watch one of them unroll a parchment with the outline of a female human body, as if it were a frame waiting for colors. Over this drawing, she applies small cutouts of fabric, lines of dyed string and hand-painted symbols. Each marked point corresponds to an area of the body, and each point is, according to her, a place where a story is kept. You approach an older woman, sitting in the shade of a broad canopied tree. She holds a carved wooden staff, and beside her rests a tray of small clay jars, each sealed with dark wax. These, she says without you asking, are the scents that are no more. We tattoo the memory. She opens one of the bottles. The scent that comes out is faint, almost shy, something between smoke and overripe fruit candy. A scent that feels familiar. You try to name it but fail. And that apparently is the point. The woman smiles. When you don't know the name of the smell, it could be anything, including yourself. You thank her and watch as another young woman completes her design, a sinuous line flanked by lines that resemble wings. She places it on her thigh, closes her eyes and takes a deep breath. The tattoo artist approaches. Within a few hours, that invisible scent, or rather its memory, will be immortalized there, between her skin and the wind. And you realize that in that world, love doesn't need to be seen, it just needs to be felt. The sun now filters more gently through the branches of the trees surrounding the village, as if it too were tired or curious. You follow a narrow path until you reach a clearing marked with pale stones and braided ribbons attached to stakes. In the center, a circular structure made of sticks and dry leaves sways gently in the wind. This is where the braided shadows ceremony. You approach and notice that the brides are standing, wrapped in translucent robes that leave their silhouettes visible. Behind them, large cotton cloths are stretched out on the floor, like canvases waiting for paint. But it's not brushes they'll be using. It's their own bodies. Each young woman stands facing the setting sun. One by one, they perform a sequence of slow, measured movements, like a silent dance learned at an early age. As they move, their shadows project shapes onto the screens, curves, angles, gestures, and it is from these shadows that the tattoo patterns will emerge. Older women sitting around the circle weave strips of colored fabric and strategically position them over the projected shadows, highlighting certain shapes and hiding others. The result is almost magical. The shadow of the leg transforms into a wave. The curve of the shoulder becomes a wing. The turn of the waist creates a whirlwind. A younger girl whispers, "The shadow shows what the body has not yet said." And you feel that somehow she is right. The outline that emerges from this process will then be copied with light charcoal onto the bride's skin, not perfectly, but with intention. The important thing is not that the design stays the same, it's that it repeats the gesture. That carries the rhythm of the movement, as if the tattoo could remind the body of the way he danced that afternoon. Historically, Mayan murals depict human figures in positions similar to those seen here. Arms outstretched, heads tilted, legs partially rotated. Some scholars believe that these murals were not just artistic representations, but guardians of ritual choreographies. Body patterns that should be imitated in specific ceremonies, like this one. Historians still debate whether shadow tattoos were symbolic or merely aesthetic, but it's hard to believe that something so carefully executed was just for decoration. You watch one of the brides dance. Her movements are slow and delicate, as if she is trying to remember something her body has forgotten. Her shadow ripples across the stretched fabric, and when she finishes, two older women applaud, clapping their open hands together in a ceremonial rhythm. She sits on the ground and, with her eyes closed, stretches out her arms. Another woman begins to mark her skin with charcoal, tracing the newly generated shapes. Around her, the ribbons attached to the stakes continue to dance in the wind, as if guarding what was created there. And for a moment, you don't know if you're watching a tattoo being born, or if you're watching a memory being written in time. You continue on through the village, which is now slowly sinking into early evening. Golden light softens the edges of the mud houses, and the first lamps are lit with scented oil. There is a faint smell of burning herbs in the air, and in the background the low, spaced sound of a bone flute. Everything is quieter, but it is a silence that carries expectation, because it is at this time, they say, that the signs appear. You arrive at a low-ceilinged hut where thick smoke billows from a vent in the center. Inside, the room is enveloped in a humid heat. The only light comes from a burning ember in the middle of the floor and bowls releasing thick steam made of cooked leaves, resins, and a golden substance that slowly drips from a wooden tube. Sitting in front of the smoke is a bride with her eyes half closed. She takes a deep breath and remains still. The ritual is simple. Sit, inhale, and wait. The smoke will show something. Suddenly, she moves. He appeared, he says softly. The jaguar. The shaman leading the ceremony nods as if he had expected this. He hands her a small black stone carved with fine lines, the symbol of the jaguar. The tattoo will be placed on her right shoulder, but not as a choice, but as a warning. You sit in the corner of the room watching other brides go through the same process. Some see birds, others describe rivers, mountains, trees with mouths. One whispers that she saw her grandmother sitting on a floating log, drawing with her fingers in the air. Everything is written down. Nothing is questioned. Symbols emerging from smoke are taken seriously. They say they are revelations of the spirit, not just the woman, but the marriage itself, as if the smoke were more interested in what is to come than what has passed. Historically, smoke-induced visions were present in many Mayan rituals. Resins, such as copal, and leaves from local plants, were burned to produce aromatic vapors that facilitated trance states. Ancient accounts mention leaders and priests using these practices before important decisions, and among women, especially in rites of union, fertility, or renewal. Historians still debate whether the visions were individual experiences induced by cultural suggestion or by chemical compounds present in plants. But for those who lived, it doesn't matter. The vision is truth. Simple as that. One of the young women stands up, still trembling. She says she saw a bird with the head of a fish and the tail of a serpent. The symbol that will emerge from her will be hybrid, complex, difficult to tattoo, but necessary. It's a reminder that love demands adaptation, says the shaman without blinking. You breathe in the thick air of the cabin. There isn't enough smoke for you to see anything, but for a brief moment when you blink, there's a figure that could maybe be a jaguar, or just its reflection in the shine of the wet stone next to it. Anyway, you'd rather not comment. After all, as they said earlier, the skin sometimes sees before the mind understands. You leave the smoke hut feeling the air lighter, as if you had passed through a curtain made of memory. The village is now bathed in the deep blue of twilight, and small points of light flicker in the windows of each house. It is at this moment, when neither day nor night seem sure where they are, that you spot a group of women gathered around a polished stone mirror. They are observing something curious. A young woman standing with her arms raised, showing off her new tattoo on the side of her torso. The image? A set of intertwined lines and circles. But what catches their attention is not the drawing itself. It is the fact that it seems to move. You move closer. As your muscles move, the tattoo actually transforms. Curves lengthen, circles flatten, and lines dance as if they have a life of their own. It's not magic. It's pure engineering of the body. The design is so precisely designed, calculating every fold, every tension of the skin, that it responds to your movements as if it were reacting emotionally. The young woman smiles. It was inspired by a water frog, she says, but now it looks like a dancing star. And you believe it. The image really does change. It depends on the angle, the gesture, the breathing. A tattoo that behaves. The tattoo artist who did this piece is there too. She holds a board with other similar sketches, all based on animals. Waves, leaves blowing in the wind, but none of them are static. They were all conceived as shapes, kinetics, which only make sense when the body moves. She explains that before tattooing, she spends hours observing the walk and gestures of each bride. The design is born the way she inhabits her own body. Historically, there are records of Mayan tattoos adapting to the natural lines of the body, but few studies have delved into the idea of designs made to move. Some modern archaeologists have found repeated patterns on female bones, where the marks were positioned precisely over areas of greatest muscular tension: shoulders, ribs, hips. This suggests a sophisticated knowledge of functional anatomy combined with ritual aesthetics. Historians still debate whether this type of tattoo was intentionally animated or whether the effect was just a happy accident. But the women who wear it don't seem interested in the debate. For them, the movement is part of the message. A younger girl, watching everything silently, asks the tattooed woman, "What if one day you stop moving like that?" The woman thinks for a moment and answers, "Then she will become something else, and so will I." You smile. There is too much wisdom in that still young body. And even now, as the sand sways gently around the bowls and the young women absorb their fates in almost ceremonial silence, there is room for laughter. One of the girls blurts out, "I hope my symbol isn't a naked lizard," and the entire group gasps in laughter. The old woman smiles but carries on as if nothing has happened, ritual dignity with a touch of maternal tolerance. You follow the group's latest reading. The old woman tosses the objects and, for a moment, stops. Her face changes. She looks directly at you. This one doesn't belong to anyone present," she says, picking up the pieces more carefully than before. You remain silent. Maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe, as they said before, the skin isn't the only part you already know. You follow a shaded trail where the heat of the day is filtered through broad leaves and intertwined branches. The ground creaks beneath your feet with a sound of dry bark and hidden roots. At the end of the trail, a group of women bend over a set of hot stones and wooden slabs. Around them, ceramic bowls rest silently, as if they held secrets in a liquid state. There, the preparations are being made, ceremonial paints. And, as you soon realize, this is far from a simple task. The colors come from unlikely combinations. Tree bark ash, charcoal powder obtained from fires made only with fallen tree branches, and a special ingredient, sun-dried lizard scales, crushed until they become an iridescent powder that shines in direct light. It is this powder that gives the paint an almost metallic reflection, capable of changing color slightly, depending on the angle and temperature of the skin. You watch as one of the women mixes the ground scales with a viscous liquid extracted from fermented fruit. The smell isn't pleasant, but it's not bad either. It's intriguing, as if the paint smells like a memory, like something you've forgotten to smell. In another bowl, a black ink is slowly being incorporated with small fragments of quartz, not for visual effect, but to create a texture that the ancients believed helped anchor the symbol in the body. Yes, anchor. Because for the Mayans, a poorly anchored tattoo could wander through the soul and cause forgetfulness, sadness, or even distrust in others. "This one," says a young woman, pointing to a moss-green mixture, "is only used for collarbone. Tattoos. They say it helps you carry less emotional weight." She laughs afterward, but the truth is there more firmly than the smile. You notice that the pigments are prepared in silence. All conversation is done with gestures or murmurs. This is because, according to tradition, the sound of human words can interfere with the color personality. Yes, because each color, they believe, has a temperament. Some are restless and need to be calmed down. Others are shy and express themselves better when no one is looking directly at them. Historically, the Mayans extracted dyes from insects, minerals, and plants, including the famous Mayan blue, whose durability amazes archaeologists to this day. But beyond their technical function, these dyes carried stories and taboos. A certain shade of red, for example, could only be used by women who had dreamed of fire for 3 consecutive nights. Another, more opaque shade was associated with healers who had lost their husbands in battle. Historians still debate whether these restrictions had religious, social, or psychological bases. But one thing is certain: color was not just about appearance. It was about behavior, energy, and destiny. As you watch, one of the women lifts a small bone spatula and spreads a drop of blue paint onto the hot stone. The color bubbles slightly and expands as if it were alive. She likes the heat, she says, as if speaking of a domestic creature. But if you yell at her, she'll go completely black. You don't dare say a word, you just nod. At that moment, paint is not a material. It is a memory about to be born on someone's skin. You're beginning to realize that everything in this Mayan wedding ritual revolves around timing and intention. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is done on a whim. Everything has a reason, even the thorns carefully lined up on a red fiber cloth in the next house you visit. There, sitting on a straw mat and covered by a shawl embroidered with zigzagging snakes, is the tattoo artist. She is small, thin as a cornea picked too early, and her fingers seem to be made of polished stone. Each movement is precise, slow, almost invisible. Beside her is a bowl of natural needles made from acacia thorns and the finest fish bones. She sharpens each one with a black obsidian stone that shines like a jaguar's eye. She is known in the village as the woman with the obsidian fingers, although no one says it out loud. They say she can even tattoo the inside of your thoughts, if necessary. You watch her as she prepares one of the brides. The young woman lies down on a mat, takes a deep breath, and the tattoo artist begins the line without making a sound. The pigment is dark, almost dry, and she deposits it drop by drop before piercing the skin with touches that look more like insect kisses. The scene is mesmerizing. The movements are minimal, but constant. The line grows gradually, a spiral enveloping a branch, which turns into an eye, which turns into a four-pointed star, all without her even stopping to rest. The only sound is the soft click of the needle against her skin and a rhythmic whisper that she sings softly, perhaps just to herself. Historically, tattoos among the Mayans were performed with needles made of thorns, bones, or obsidian flakes, and the technique involved piercing the epidermis with direct application of pigment. But beyond the technique, there was the importance of silence and repetition. It was believed that the tattoo artist's breathing pattern influenced the line, and so many practiced breath control as part of the preparation. Historians still debate whether the knowledge was passed down orally or whether there were symbolic forms encoded within the tattoos. Some scholars claim to have found repeated structures that suggest hidden alphabets, messages visible only to those who knew how to read the skin. You notice a curious detail. Before starting each session, the tattoo artist traces an invisible symbol on the bride's forehead with a wet finger. She waits 10 seconds, then blows it out. Only then does she touch the needle. "This is so..." "The skin knows it's about to be touched for real," whispers an apprentice next to her. You discreetly approach a parchment spread behind her. On it are dozens of small sketches in red and brown ink, symbols that resemble paths, eyes, rivers, snakes, stars, drops, teeth, seeds. Most of them are impossible to understand, and that's okay. It's not up to you to understand them. One of the young women stands up after the session is over. Her skin is marked, yes, but what she carries now feels more like a planted memory, as if the past itself has been sewn into her flesh. The tattoo artist looks over at you. She doesn't say anything, but her eyes shine like freshly polished obsidian. You feel a strange tingling sensation on your arm. Nothing visible, of course. Just the feeling that maybe you've been here before. You leave the tattoo artist's house with the impression that silence is, in fact, the most spoken language there, but it doesn't last long. Soon, soft laughter and curious voices reach your ears, coming from a clearing surrounded by bushes with discreet flowers. It is a circular space, marked with white stones and colorful strings that sway gently in the wind. In the center, several young women are sitting in pairs, drawing on pieces of cloth. Each one is creating an image based on a scent. Yes, tattoos that represent forgotten smells. You approach a pair. One of them holds a small bag of woven fibers. She opens it carefully, as if she were handling the baby of a sacred animal. Inside are dried petals of a pinkish beige flower. She rubs one between her fingers and brings it to her nose. She closes her eyes. She smiles. And then, with fine charcoal, she begins to draw on the fabric, a spiral pattern with small, zigzag stems. "This flower only blooms during the equinox," says her friend. "It smells like honey and wet stone." The tattoo that will represent this scent will be scentless, of course, but the markings have traditionally been associated with perfumes used at weddings for generations. Each line represents a note of the scent, each dot a memory evoked by Yet another girl shows a sketch of a symbol with concentric circles and ascending lines. "It's the smell of my grandmother's steam," she says almost proudly. "She would make tea from the leaves when she dreamed of thunder." And you? Think, some families pass on recipes, others pass on smells. Historically, the Mayans had a ritual relationship with aromas. The smell of burning copal, for example, was associated with the presence of the gods. Natural perfumes made from roots and flowers were used in ceremonies and had meanings linked to fertility, protection, and communication with ancestors. Some scholars believe that certain combinations of aromatic tattoos serve to identify not only lineages, but also specific spiritual affiliations. Historians still debate whether the symbols related to aromas had a codified graphic structure, or whether they followed the individual sensory logic of each community. After all, the smell of the same flower can mean comfort for some and mourning for others. Hey guys, tonight we're going way back to a humid village in the heart of the Maya world, where the morning doesn't start with coffee, but with the scent of burning leaves, charcoal paint, and anticipation. Yes, today you'll walk among mud houses covered in palm fronds, listening to the sound of stone grinders and chickens running free, while a group of young women prepare for one of the most important moments of their lives, choosing their wedding tattoos. And, spoiler, this process involves less ink and more ritual than you would probably imagine. Tattooing here is not a fashion statement. It is identity, memory, and sometimes defense against the wrong dreams. Literally. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the smell of warm coals and burning bark. The first light of morning slides over the thatched roofs, and you walk between vegetable gardens and stone paths until you reach a small clearing where a group of young women are already kneeling, grinding ash mixed with bark and dried flowers. The sound is soft, circular, as if the earth itself is breathing. The ink they prepare is dark with purplish hues, but when the light hits it from the side, you see metallic reflections. They whisper as they work, each one recounting dreams, visions, and childhood memories, because it is from these fragments that the tattoo symbol will be chosen. You watch as one of them separates a small dollop of the dark paste into a clay pot. She blows gently on it and the surface trembles slightly as if breathing. "This paint is for the back of the neck," says the old woman next to you, with a calm smile. That's where dreams usually enter first. Historically, the Mayans did not use tattoos merely for decorative purposes. They served as markers of transition, from childhood to youth, from celibacy to marriage, from the earth to the other world. The marks made on the skin carried meanings that went far beyond the visible. They involved family myths, astral signs, and even the crop cycle. It is known, for example, that the time of the corn harvest determined the best day to tattoo certain symbols associated with abundance. And yet, despite all this solemnity, there is humor. One of the girls laughs out loud when she sees the makeshift drawing of a clumsy turtle on her thigh, clearly the work of a friend with more enthusiasm than talent. "This one's just for rehearsal," she says, covering the mark with her hands. You notice how the gestures are gentle, almost ceremonial. Each brushstroke of preparation has an order. First the cleaning with copal leaves, then the fragrant seed oil, and finally the application of the paste on a flat stone for color testing. An older woman walks by, her arms covered in faded tattoos. She looks at the preparations and mutters, "You don't choose the design. The design chooses you." No one answers, but everyone nods. Historians still debate whether these symbolic choices were made by the brides themselves, by shamans, or through interpretive rituals such as induced. Dreams or seed games? Some believe it was all an intuitive mix of the three, which, let's face it, makes a lot more sense. The morning wears on, and now the air smells of crushed flowers, sweet wood smoke, and the faint burn of pigment warming in the sun. You step back a little, sit on a rock and watch, and from where you stand, what strikes you most is not the drawings yet to come, but the confident silence of these women, As if they already knew, before the ink, before the pain, that this mark will not be just yours. It will be history's too. The sun is already a little higher when you approach one of the most discreet tents in the village. Unlike the others, which smell of paint or coal, this one emits only steam, constant, thick, fragrant. It's as if the humidity has been tamed inside and is now slowly escaping, revealing a secret with each puff. You enter slowly. The air inside is warm, almost stuffy, and there are ceramic pots scattered everywhere, each with a damp cloth over its mouth. In the center, a young woman holds a copper mirror, trying to see the side of her own neck. And then, beneath the steam, something appears. A drawing. It wasn't there before. You swear. A subtle spiral pattern with dots around it emerges like invisible ink revealed by moisture. The young woman smiles. It's the first time she's seen her steam tattoo. And, according to her, it will probably be the last for a long time. These tattoos, explains the elder of the tent, are made with a special ink prepared with tree resin, dew water collected at dawn, and dried papaya seed powder. The mixture is applied to specific areas of the body and dried in the sun without leaving any visible traces. Only when exposed to humid heat from baths, kitchens, or very hot nights do they appear, like memories poking at the skin. You approach one of the steam basins and see another girl stretching her arm over it. Slowly, a sinuous line begins to emerge. It looks like a snake intertwined with leaves, but the most curious thing is that the line seems to tremble with her breathing, as if it were alive. Historically, there is evidence that the Maya used heat and moisture-sensitive pigments, not just for practical reasons, but out of belief. What is hidden has power, the invisible protects. Some inscriptions suggest that these marks were applied to people of spiritual lineage, or to brides, whose marriage involved alliances between distant families, as a way of keeping the name hidden until the union was complete. Historians still debate whether these inks were deliberately invisible or whether they simply degraded over time, giving them that mystical quality. But let's face it, the idea that your symbol only appears when you sweat or dream is much more fun. You notice a bronze mirror facing you. Out of curiosity, you lean in a little, and right there, on your left shoulder, as if it had been traced, silently a drawing appears. It wasn't there before. Or was it? You don't ask, you don't comment. The woman next to him looks on and simply says, "Sometimes your skin knows more than you do." She closes the bottle. The steam subsides. The drawing disappears, and the tent goes back to being just a warm room where secrets breathe between damp cloths and closed pots. You leave the steam tent with your skin still damp and your mind spinning, like a newly untied ball of yarn. The warm morning breeze slowly dries your arms and carries away any trace of the symbol you, maybe, saw. But it doesn't matter, because just ahead, another kind of preparation is underway. A group of women sit in a circle arranging bowls of corn kernels, polished fish bones, and small pieces of volcanic stone. In the center, an elderly woman holds a cloth dyed a deep blue. She closes her eyes, touches the bowls with her fingertips, and begins to sing a low song, closer to a rhythmic whisper than a melody. The young women around her, brides in preparation, watch in silence, holding small talismans between their fingers. You approach and sit between them. The old woman opens her eyes and smiles, not surprised by your presence. "Today is the day to choose who you already are but don't know it yet," she says, taking a handful of corn seeds and throwing them onto a flat board covered in fine sand. The seeds fall with soft pops, some upright, others lying down, forming patterns that she observes with absolute attention. "That's northern corn," he murmurs, pointing to a clump of pale kernels. "You were born with the gift of making." Others laugh. Then he twirls a thin bone between his fingers. It falls to its side, trembling. "But there's also an impatient spirit in your feet." A young woman laughs nervously. "It's about her." Probably. Each woman there will go through this ritual, reading seeds, bones, and visions. The result will determine not only the design of the tattoo, but its exact location, your order of application, and even the days of silence she must keep before the wedding. Yes, days of silence. Because, they say, too many words spoil the ink. You watch a reading for a girl with feathered hair. The seeds form a semicircle, the old woman sighs. The symbol will be a three-eyed bird. The girl widens her eyes in surprise. But only two eyes appear, she says. The old woman responds with a wink. The third one only appears after the new moon. Historically, divination rituals were common among the Mayans and involved everyday objects linked to the earth, sea and blood, corn, fish, stones, flowers. Each element had meanings that crossed with the sacred calendar, the Tzolkin, and with personal astrology. It was a world where chance did not exist, only messages not yet translated,